Patricia Engel is here with us today to talk about her new book, Infinite Country. And I just want to say welcome. Thank you so much for being here. So excited to sit with you and chat about your new book. I was going to, I want to gush all about it, but I was reading this review from the New York Times that I thought perfectly describes your novel. So I'm just going to read from that really quickly because I think it does a much better job articulating it. The prose is serpentine and exciting and exciting as it takes the scenic route to nowhere. There's a compliment in that. Her writing sets out to be majestic, and it is like an overflowing souffle. The novel follows a mixed status family as they struggle to survive and reunite after a father's deportation from the United States. The teenage Talia, American-born but raised in Colombia, escapes a reform school in the Andes and races to make her plane to rejoin her mom and siblings in New York. 20 years of page-turning family history are told as she rushes to catch that plane. The most unforgettable scenes in the novel are the intimate and meticulously rendered descriptions of Andean landscapes and mythology of Colombia's long history of violence. Engel's capacity to dive deep into history and folklore extends also into her narration of the life of Talia's father and the family patriarch Mauro. I agree wholeheartedly with the New York Times, and I love each and every member of this family and getting to know them in their words and experiences. And that being said, I just want to get straight to the point and to the beginning and the heart of your story, which is Talia. How did you decide to start this way with her escape with the nun? How did you come to that?
Well, for a few years, I'd been thinking about writing this family novel. Infinite Country is my fourth book, and my first three books have all explored immigration in different ways, but they've always focused on a single character. So I really wanted to write a book that was about an entire family and the collective family experience, but also in a way that got into the private experience of each of the family members. In the case of this family, it's five family members, two parents and three kids. So I knew that I would be getting into the kids, and they would be important and vital. It happened that as I was doing just my early dreaming about this novel, I read a news story about a group of adolescent girls who broke out of a juvenile correction center in the mountains in Colombia. And I just, was kind of struck by that. And I thought, wow, this must be a group of really bold and badass girls, but there was no information, no details. I just had the image of these girls breaking themselves out and disappearing into the hills. So that stuck with me for a while. And then when I actually came back to really get into the project of this novel, that image returned to me. And it was one of the first that I wrote for this novel. And that sentence, it was her idea to tie up the nun, is the first sentence that I wrote for Infinite Country, actually. So it just kind of came together a bit organically, as a lot of writing inspiration does, and it just kind of connects and finds its way into the work.
It's so beautiful, and I know from speaking from my perspective, it hit me so hard and immediately was drawn to like what is happening. And I remember I was listening to it. I say tape, but I was listening to it on Audible. In my car, and I had my 9-year-old, actually I had my 7-year-old in the back seat of the car, and we were driving in Idaho in the mountains and weaving along, and it was like the perfect story to listen to. And for a second I thought, well, maybe it's not appropriate for Shep, and Shep's just sitting there with like, no, please don't, please turn it up, please turn it up. We heard that first sentence and immediately he was like, what is happening? And I thought like perfect way to just slam and bring you into the heart and the middle of the family story. And I thought that was just so powerful to almost start in the middle. How did you decide on that being the sort of like the middle, of their middle part of their journey, essentially?
Yeah, and that's she's really an anchor for the whole family, so to speak, in that because you find out that she was sent back to Colombia by her mother when she was a baby, and they've lived apart for 15 years. And now she's got to urgently get back to Bogota in order to catch the plane to return to the United States and be reunited with her mom and her siblings. So that's her, immediate journey. But of course, none of that could be told without telling the story of the whole family, beginning with how the parents meet and the kind of teenagers they were when they met and they fell in love and they made a family together. So it's just really a question of approaching time in an interesting way. We live our lives in the present, but none of this would exist without explaining ourselves for the stories that came before us and that made us who we are. And we all know our family stories mostly, and those are also connected to how we are. So I wanted the story of the present to feel like someone was sitting down and telling it to you. And of course, you do find out that it's Karina is telling you the story, but there's no way that she could move beyond the story of her sister without then going back to the story of her parents. And then you see how it all fits together. But Talia is a driving force. She's a driving force for the entire family. Her absence has a huge impact on her brother and sister's lives, even though they hardly know her. So it was a way for getting at all of those ideas, and it just felt right.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And again, goes back to the snake analogy, because it just weaves that story so beautifully, and to see the beginning and ending of these families, and you can see that it's going to continue on, which brings me to the cover of your book, which is so striking and it's so beautiful. And I read that the original title for Infinite Country was The Jaguar, the Snake, and the Condor. And then I read that you said that the three children each represent an animal. Which child is which animal?
Well, it's a bit for the reader to determine themselves. But yeah, the book was just all mine for many years before, obviously, it had a life as a published book. And in those years when it was just me and my book that I was working on, the title that I referred to it as in my mind and in every way was The Jaguar, the Snake, and the Condor. When it came time to getting closer to publication, I thought that was a bit long for a cover. So I started searching in the book for just language of the book, and that's why Infinite Country just jumped out at me, and it felt even better a fit for the title. But yeah, if you there's all sorts of hidden stories, I feel like, that writers put into their own works that sometimes readers pick up on and sometimes they don't. And one of those is that kind of beneath the surface architecture. And in this case, yes, it is. It's the three siblings each represent those mythic creatures, the jaguar, the snake, and the condor, which are really present in a lot of mythological and ancestral traditions across the Americas. But they are different guardians of the upper world, of the earth world, and of the underworld. And each one has different qualities, different traits, you could say. And so I did see each of the siblings as being representative of each of those, but I'm not going to say which is which.
Love it. That's awesome. What is your writing process like? You were saying you sat on this for a while. Is that typical for you, or
Yeah, it is typical for me. I started thinking about Infinite Country as a book, maybe almost 10 years ago. But I was writing other books at the time, and those felt more immediate, and they're just the ones that I wanted to tackle first. But I think that's really typical of a lot of writers. A lot of writers feel like you have multiple books already living in you, and then it's just a question of when are you going to sit down to write them. So in the case of Infinite Country, which is fairly typical in some ways. Each book is different. Each book kind of presents itself differently with different needs for how it needs to be written. But with Infinite Country, I thought about it a long time. I did a lot of research. I did a lot of planning. I take a lot of notes. I could even show you some of my notebooks. I'm always surrounded by my notebooks. Here's a bunch. This is actually an Infinite Country notebook. You can see the Colombian flag, the jaguar on it. I decorate them. But so I just fill up notebooks with ideas, with inspirations, with research, with plans, with bits of scenes, of dialogue, just little things, I kind of make trails for myself in order to move forward deeper into a project. And then when I actually start writing, if I happen to lose my way in the writing, then I go back to my notebooks and I kind of remember what my original impulses and inspirations were. So they really guide me in a lot of ways. And I wait a long time before I sit down to write a book because I really feel like I have to know it really intuitively. And that's what my notebooks help me to do before I can start writing it, or I just kind of hit a wall, write myself into a wall, and then I give up. And that's happened in the past. So I try to prevent all that by really sitting with an idea for a long, long time before I start writing it.
I love that. Do you continually expand in your notebook as you go on, or the notebook is like?
Oh yeah, no, I have tons. So there's like, I go on to the first, the second, third, and then each book has tons of notebooks that go with it. And then as I start revising and I have drafts, then I make notes regarding what I've already written and what I want to fix, what I need to think about more, what I need to work out. It's kind of like having an assistant. Like it's like talking to myself, through my notebooks, reminding myself, what I should be looking at. And yeah, I keep them every step of the process.
I love that. Your book is just over 200 pages, which is
Mm-hmm.
quite short for a novel these days. And I read in an interview that you challenged yourself to keep it short. Why?
Yeah, my last book, The Veins of the Ocean, was 400 pages. It's double the length. So I just didn't feel like doing the same thing. The first draft of Infinite Country was much longer. It was a lot longer, and it could have easily been a much longer book. And that's where I thought the challenge was, to tell this very wide, expansive story in a really focused and sharp and constrained way, so that every sentence felt really essential and muscular and like it's doing a lot of work because it's, such a short story. But I wanted it to feel have the intensity, almost replicate the intensity of real life, which is like when someone tells you something, shares something with you, kind of like in one big intense conversation, right? And it's something that like it locks you in, you don't step away from it, right? I hoped to create something like that. Whereas with a bigger book, people have to take time with it. They have to step away, they have to take breaths. And it's a different experience. I love big books, don't get me wrong, and I like writing them. But this story, for the subject matter and what it was, I felt like it needed to be pushed into a more focused and tighter space.
That's so interesting that you're talking about like the musculature of these words and these sentences and the prose. Because I have a couple of my favorite passages when you're talking about love, which is such a simple emotion but very complex, and I think that your prose just really packs that punch of simplifying it. I mean,
Mhm.
and I'm going to read some so I apologize because I just think that they're so cool and so powerful.
Okay.
But she may not recognize me when I arrive, but she will know in some part of her that someone who loves her is with her. People say drugs and alcohol are the greatest and most persuasive narcotics, the elements most likely to ruin a life. They're wrong. It's love. Only women knew the strength it took to love men through their evolution to who they thought they were supposed to be. Real love, her mother once told her, was proven only by endurance. That night, I thought about how love comes paired with failures, apologies for deficiencies. The only antidote is compassion, which that one I love. And maybe there is no nation or citizenry. They're just terrorists, or excuse me, I need glasses. They're just territories mapped in place of family, in place of love, the infinite country. I mean, for lack of better words on my part, love is just this heartbeat throughout your story. Was that challenging to write about such a complex and simple emotion? I mean, I know you're saying that these sentences have such musculature to them. Is that something that comes really easy for you, or is that something that's more challenging?
The way I think about it, Infinite Country is a novel about love, all different kinds of love. It's a novel about the love between two teenagers who fall in love and, you know, have a child and then make a family together. It's about the love between a parent and their child, between a mother and child, a father and child, between a grandparent and a grandchild, and it's the love between siblings, and of course the love that you have for your homeland, and even for a place where you make a new home and a new homeland. So it is a novel just about navigating love all around. But I mean, love is never an easy road to be on either. So I wanted to write to that too. And it's never a certain one. And it's often full of doubt and confusion and regret and all sorts of things. So I wanted to write towards that complexity and the nuances of it as well. And often it disappoints you and it fails you, but that's really kind of the magic and mystery of it if you stick with it.
Yeah, absolutely. How much research did Infinite Country require in regards to the mythology and the folklore?
Um, Well, my mother is from Bogota, where a lot of Infinite Country is set. That's my mom's hometown and where all my mom's family still lives. So it's a place that I know pretty well, not like a, you know, native, but I know it pretty well. And because my mom's from that region and her family has been there for generations, I also knew a lot of the mythology that is specific to that region, which is of the Muisca civilization. And they were one of the four advanced civilizations of the Americas. Most people are more familiar with like the Mayas and the Incas and the Aztecs, but the Muisca were also, you know, a very large and advanced civilization. So I knew a lot of those stories, but then over the years, I learned more. People shared more with me. And also just because I'm a naturally curious person, I learned more kind of through the trail of research. One thing leads to another. And there's a lot of stories in the novel that are not specific to the region of Bogota. They're more particular to other regions. So those are things that I, you know, picked up on my travels. I've spent a lot of time traveling in Colombia, and it was important to include those because when you leave a country to make a life in another, your stories are often the only thing you take with you. And it's only by remembering them and repeating them that you can hold on to them because they're very quickly lost. So I wanted to show that not just the, you know, the not superficial, but the, you know, immediate practical experience of what immigration involves in that process, but also the much deeper soul level of it, and how a person who's, you know, been in a homeland for generations, for centuries, how deeply you're connected to it, and how the stories of that land, such a particular landscape like Bogota, which is like on the equator, high in the Andes Mountains. I mean, there's really no other place like it. The resonance that those stories have for the people who are from there.
Did you travel around while you were writing this?
The story came to me over several years. I was thinking about it for several years. So yeah, I was in Colombia for many times over the years. You know, I'll give you an example. So how, you know, life kind of works its way into a work of fiction. Um, so Talia, as you find out, is in a correctional facility because she's committed a crime. You know, there's no doubt she's committed this crime, right? Whether you think it was justified or not, it's really up to you. But that, not exactly how it happened in the novel, but that event was inspired by a story that a young girl told me when I was in Colombia. I was there for a book event because my books are published there. And a girl who was assigned to like escort me, take me around and drive me around and stuff, she told me a story similar to that. And so that parts of it were true. So that made a very strong impression on me, and enough that I wrote it into my book. You know, so sometimes that does happen.
That's wild. I was wondering the how you thought of the crime. So that's so interesting because
Mhm.
it could have been avoided so easily, or, it could have gone either way. And it's so, I like that it was, that you're also posing it like, it depends on your take if it was a crime or not a crime, or she should have been punished. It's true. You're a hugely celebrated author. You have won many prizes and awards, including being the first woman to be awarded Colombia's National Prize in Literature, which is amazing. What was it like having such a buzzed about novel come out during the pandemic? Do you miss the book tour? Do you miss in-person interviews? Like, what do you think about that, and how do you feel?
You know, I didn't know what to expect. When I wrote the book, I had no idea it would be published in a pandemic. So it's different. What can I tell you? It's different. Normally for a book tour, I would be traveling more, going to bookstores and festivals and things and seeing people. And what's nice about that is just kind of the spontaneity when, that can only happen in person, where people open up and share things. And so I really miss that human exchange. And of course, being in bookstores, which I so love. But at the same time, I feel like publishing has adapted itself to the limitations of the pandemic by opening up the virtual space in such incredible ways, where I can, you're in Austin and I'm in Florida, and here we are just taking time out of our day to chat like nothing, and people are joining us from all over. So that's really special, and I feel like that just opens up the world of books in whole new ways. So that's really been wonderful, I have to say. And of course, because I'm not getting on airplanes, I can do a lot more events and reach a lot more people and talk to a lot more people about books. So my hope is always that people who are watching these events are still supporting bookstores, who normally rely on those in-person events.
Yeah, absolutely. All the small bookstores are so important. Mm-hmm. It's really important to keep those bookstores alive. I know we do a lot of posting with local ones here too. So, what kind of things inspire you book-wise? Like, are you reading anything right now that is exciting to you? Are there particular books that you go to for inspiration, or?
I have, I love your bookshelves behind you. I have, my bookshelves.
I have a lot of work to do, but
no, you should see mine. But, I have kind of, my bookshelves are all arranged like very sentimentally. I have kind of like my oldest favorites, my repeat reads, and like there's no sort of logical way anyone else could figure out the order of my bookshelves, but it's because I have books like that I feel like are old friends that I keep coming back to and stuff like that. But there's so many great books out there. For people who like Infinite Country, for example, I could tell you a whole bunch of books, that would be like a next great read if you're interested in the subject matter or anything about it. So, for example, if you're interested in Colombian writers, I'll just tell you a bunch of Colombian writers who have great new books out available in English. So Ingrid Rojas Contreras wrote a beautiful book called Fruit of the Drunken Tree, which is just gorgeous. And she's Colombian, and it's set in Bogota as well. There's a book called The Bitch by Pilar Quintana, which is available in English. It was a National Book Award finalist last year. It's a beautiful book. I recommend that as well. Colombian writer who lives in Argentina. Her name is Margarita Garcia Roballo. She's got a great story collection called Fish Soup, and a novel called Holiday Heart, now available in English as well. So there's a whole bunch that you could, read if you're still interested in Colombia. And then other books that are coming out by favorite writers of mine. There's a book called The President and the Frog by Carolina de Robertis coming out this summer, and another one called The Kissing Bug by Daisy Hernandez, another Colombian writer, coming out in June. So definitely put those on your library reserves or pre-order them because they're great.
I love that. I love learning about new authors, and I've loved learning about Colombia. You just took us on this gorgeous journey that was just, I can't wait to go and explore it myself. What is next for you? Like, what are you working on now? Is there anything to talk about?
Yeah, I have a book that's going to follow Infinite Country. It's a collection of short stories that I've been working on over the last 10 or so years. Short stories. Writing short stories is another favorite thing of mine. I don't only write novels, and I like writing short stories because it's like, you know, they're much more transient, I guess. Like you can just like move in and out of a short story quickly, but still have a very intense experience. Whereas you really have to immerse yourself in a novel, and commit with it for a longer period. And I love both, but short stories are still, really special to me. So I've been writing these stories for a number of years already. So they're going to be in a collection that's going to be out in the not so distant future. And then I'm in very early stages of a novel, like I mentioned, that I was hoping to be deeper into by this point, but hopefully that will be on the horizon as well.
Amazing. I can't wait to look out for those.
Thank you.
I love short stories. We started in the beginning, one of our first books was Lot by Brian Washington. And that's
Oh, I love that book. Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Well, let's take some questions from our audience. Okay. What inspired you to become a writer?
I don't know if anything inspired me so much as that, like, I couldn't not write. As soon as I learned how to write, I was just like drawing on my pictures, drawing on everything. And then the first time somebody who was my uncle gave me like a journal, a blank book with, lines, I was like, oh my God, it was like the thing I'd been waiting for all my life. And I just never stopped writing from that. So it just was so natural and urgent for me to always be writing. I didn't know any writers though, and I didn't know how you become a writer or make a path as a writer or anything. I just wrote for myself, just like pure love of writing. And it wasn't until much later in my life that I figured out that, oh, this is something I could pursue in a professional way.
Well, clearly with your debut novel being nominated, that's incredible. Clearly you're brilliant at it. What are your thoughts on the current immigration system and violence that often arises due to stereotypical view of immigrants carrying the negative connotation?
Well, obviously it's inhumane and unfair. And if as a people, as a society, we could just lead with compassion always, I think that things would happen very differently. But certain systems are in place because obviously there's people who benefit from marginalizing people and marginalizing their rights. And I think when we interrogate who stands to gain from the exploitation and dehumanization of others, then it would open a lot of people's eyes in new ways. And the interesting thing is that in the United States, most people have immigrant origins and have it somewhere in their past. And a lot of people either deny it or don't recall, or it doesn't feel immediate to them, and they're totally disassociated from it. And when they see other people who are really just seeking movement, which is a totally natural human instinct to move, they, cast it in a negative light and even criminalize it. And it's akin to, you live in Texas, which is a very, very, very large state, larger than most countries, but there's people who live in much smaller states. I was talking to someone who was from Massachusetts, and imagine if you were never able to leave Massachusetts to enter into a neighboring state like New Hampshire or Vermont or something, because there were borders and they don't want you and they will not let you. But Massachusetts is in a crisis. There's nothing for you there. You've got to move in order to ensure yours and your family's survival. What would that feel like to you? I think the interesting thing is, as a result of the pandemic, a lot of people have gotten a sense of what it's like to be separated from your families for reasons out of your control, and also to have borders closed to you, because most countries do not want Americans there right now. So that's a very new experience, and maybe it'll make people reflect.
I agree. I don't think that, I mean, I think this is like so minuscule in comparison to what someone going through, like
Sure.
what family went through. And I think that's why it's important to read other voices, like understanding Colombians, being refugees and coming to another country and why. There's a reason. And
yeah,
attack it with compassion and love
Mm,
is so important because we're all
yeah.
human. And majority of us in this country are immigrants. We all came from somewhere else, most
Mm.
likely for a reason. So I totally agree with you there. Um, the last question, how should someone get started in writing? Do you have any advice? And do you have any recommendations for new writers who are watching right now?
Well, the most basic thing is to get your writing done. A lot of young writers have a difficulty for actually sitting down to write. So cultivating that discipline is really important. You've got to show up for your writing the way you would show up for a doctor's appointment or for a lunch date with a friend. You know, you wouldn't just not show up, you wouldn't leave them hanging. So you've got to take yourself seriously in that way first. Um, After that, you know, when you've committed to a writing practice or writing life, find your community. It's really easy to do that online now. Find other people who are writing, who are interested in the same subject matter as you, or are at the same place in their journeys as you are, and try to cultivate that camaraderie and that support system, and find readers for your work, and you can share work and get feedback, and that's always valuable as well, until you've got a book written or something that you feel really strongly about. And then I guess what you would do is try to approach agents and get that published.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your time and being here. Thanks for your beautiful book. I know that earlier we were talking about small bookstores. Are there any bookstores that you want me to highlight maybe on my social media to buy from, or that we can
Well,
support?
you've got a great one in your city, which is Book People.
Book People.
Love Book People too. In my city, in Miami, we have Books and Books, which is an incredible bookstore. In New York City, there's many. There's McNally Jackson. Books Are Magic. And on the West Coast in LA, we've got Skylight Books and Book Passage in the Bay Area, Green Apple Books and City Lights. I did an event last night with Third Street Books in Seattle, and they're wonderful as well. In Boston, there's Brookline Booksmith. I mean, there's so many, and that's the whole thing. Is like they're just right there for us, so we should always support our indies.
Love that. Thank you again. So appreciate it. I love chatting with you, and I can't wait for your next.
Thank you so much, Jen. Thanks for sharing my book with your community of readers. I so appreciate it and so enjoy talking to you.
Me too.